Hereby, I open this academic ceremony in which Mo Chen will defend the academic thesis, Attitudes Towards Utilizing the Oceans in Contemporary Chinese Society, Gaining Insights for Sustainable Human Use of the Oceans. May I invite you to present a summary of your study and the conclusions of your thesis.
Thank you. Dear Prorector, members of Corona, supervisors, friends, and colleagues, thank you for being here today. I now present my PhD research project entitled Attitudes Towards Utilizing the Oceans in Contemporary Chinese Society, Gaining Insights for Sustainable Human Use of the Oceans. Our research project was started because of an oil spill event happening in China in 2011, the Bohai Bay oil spill event. As the left picture shows, this oil spill event happened in the Bohai Sea, which is the home of abundant marine biological, mineral, energy, and tourism resources. And this oil spill event has brought damage to the marine environment and the lives of local residents, as well as long-time lawsuits to the oil companies involved. This made me wonder, are we, as human beings, utilizing the oceans in a proper way? Combined with the increasing sustainability challenges we're confronted with nowadays, like marine biodiversity loss, climate change, overfishing, it is clear that we are using the oceans in an unsustainable way. Therefore, we need some insights to help us achieve sustainable human use of the oceans. Actually, human behavior comes from human attitudes. When we talk about sustainable human use of oceans, we do not mean there should be no use at all. Instead, we mean the use should be environmental friendly. And looking into the oceans, there are many types of marine resources which are vital to the human society. We need the marine biological resource, we need the offshore oil and gas, and our society are culturally and mentally connected with the oceans. So why don't we look at the human attitudes towards utilizing different types of resources, and maybe we can gain some insights to reach sustainable human use of the oceans. And in terms of geographical location, I would like to look at how Chinese people perceive their use of the oceans. Not only because this is where I come from, but also because China represents the big global South community, which represents nearly 18% of the world population, but seldom receive academic attention in this area. Based on the arguments above, we have formulated 3 research questions. The first one is, how do people in coastal Chinese society understand marine life and marine life protection? And what are the influential factors that shaped such public attitudes? The second one is, how do people in coastal Chinese society understand offshore oil and gas drilling, especially how much support they have to offshore oil and gas drilling, how much risks they perceive associated with offshore oil and gas drilling, and how much trust they have in offshore drilling statements. And third question is, what are the cultural and historical origins of Chinese attitudes towards marine life and offshore oil and gas drilling? An integrated assessment method was applied to answer these research questions. More specifically, an online survey was conducted to investigate public attitudes towards marine life and offshore drilling. Our online survey was carried out in the autumn of 2018. As the picture shows here, 22 Chinese coastal cities were selected as our research sites. Data collection was completed by a data agency, and 500 valid responses were obtained from nearly 1,500 distributed questionnaires. Our questionnaire was composed of 5 parts. The first part requests the demographic information from the respondents. The second part and the third part utilize the ethical position questionnaire and the new ecological paradigm. Both are widely used scales to assess the moral orientation and environmental values of our respondents. The last 2 parts used a revised version of animal attitude scale and offshore drilling questions to assess public attitudes towards marine life and offshore oil and gas drilling. And a grounded theory method was used to find the cultural and social origins of such public attitudes. We used the survey research method and also some existing literature to look at what are the historical origins of this public attitude. Our research obtained many interesting findings. Let's first look at the marine life attitude. In general, it is discovered people in coastal Chinese society hold positive attitudes towards the marine life and the marine environment. Chinese women are more friendly than Chinese men towards marine life protection. And within the several usages were targeted, we found out coastal residents are more tolerable and acceptable to using marine life in scientific studies and as food. In contrast, they find it very unacceptable and intolerable to slaughter certain type of marine life or use their skin or furs. We also find out how people view the use of marine life is correlated with one's morality and environmental values. In short, how Chinese people perceive the use of marine life is positively correlated with idealistic morality, but negatively correlated with relativistic morality. The pro-ecocentric environmental value is positively correlated with attitude towards marine life protection, while the pro-anthropocentric values correlates negatively. Besides, some demographics, such as occupation and religious beliefs, also acts as predictor of marine life attitude. After marine life attitude, let's have a look at offshore drilling attitudes. Public attitudes towards offshore oil and gas drilling in coastal Chinese society can be summarized as low support, high risk perception, and moderate trust. This low support to offshore oil and gas drilling is irrelevant with when and where the drilling operation is conducted. Interestingly, we have spotted a not in my backyard mentality towards offshore oil and gas drilling from our respondents. As regard to the high-risk perception, we found out coastal citizens tend to overestimate, sometimes even exaggerate a bit about the frequency of large-scale environmental disasters and their impacts to human health. It is also very interesting to see that coastal residents in China find environmental NGOs are more trustworthy than the oil industry. They feel the information from the environmental NGOs more reliable. And also, they tend to believe bad news more than good news. When the information indicates offshore oil drilling is safe, they tend to have less confidence in it than when it indicates offshore oil and gas drilling is risky. Now, one may have the question, why? Where do these public attitudes come from? Actually, if we categorize these human attitudes and their influential factors, we can easily find out such public awareness stems from three higher-level worldviews within the Chinese society: anthropocentrism, collectivism, and pragmatism. These three worldviews are also deeply rooted in the 1,000 years of Chinese history and traditional Chinese culture. Historically, China has been staying a long time as an agricultural society, in which agricultural production predominated every aspect of social life. Restraining commercial trades and stressing agriculture had been a fundamental policy in each dynasty throughout Chinese history. People living in this land has to be anthropocentric, collectivistic, and pragmatic in improving their productivity and withdraw from outside risks. Culturally, Confucianism is the cornerstone of Chinese culture. This modern philosophy, together with Taoism and Buddhism, favors the prevailing of anthropocentrism, collectivism, and pragmatism. Judging by our research findings, we have gained some insights for sustainable human use of the oceans. In the Chinese context, it is obvious promoting sustainable ocean use has its solid social base in modern Chinese society. Addressing the greater good can be a useful strategy to facilitate such promotion. And for the use of marine biological resource, the key is to find the balance between human needs and marine life protection. Setting boundaries, looking for substitutes can also act as strategic plans. For offshore oil and gas drilling, it is more important for the public to establish correct and rational recognition and understanding, and be careful of the role of the NIMBY mentality in policymaking. Besides, our research outcomes can also be insightful for several related areas, such as animal protection, marine spatial planning, and coastal energy development. In the global context, 3 factors are particularly significant in achieving sustainable human use of the oceans. The first one is idealistic morality. Its correlation with animal and environmental attitude has been discovered in multiple countries. The second one is anthropocentrism. Actually, we are currently located in the Anthropocene, in which humans are influencing this planet in an unprecedented level and rate. The third one is social cultural context. It has an important role in understanding why certain people understand using marine resources in certain ways. Unlike all other scientific studies, our research also has its limitation. But from a different perspective, this limitation can also be regarded as future research directions in this area. Because of our survey was conducted online, we did not receive as many respondents from the elderly and rural areas as we expected. Also, due to the questionnaire research method, we are unable to explore deeper into the human perception of certain marine resource using. Another issue is our survey was conducted prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. COVID-19 pandemic is the most important global issue in the past 2 years, and which has hugely influenced how people live and work. It also remains to be seen how the influence of COVID-19 pandemic on this attitude. But I believe our research outcomes are still meaningful in terms of this world are always full of uncertainties and the sustainability challenges we're confronted with. This dissertation demarcates the end of my PhD period, but also signals the start of my academic life. Thank you. And I'll give the floor back to you, Prorector.
Thank you, Mo Chen, for your presentation. The opposition will be opened by the chair of the assessment committee, Professor Dr. Anja Kroemeij. And Professor Kroemeij is Professor of Translational Ethnographies in Global Health and Education at the Faculty of Health, Medicine and Life Sciences of Maastricht University.
Dear candidate, I can open the questioning, but I'm also the first to congratulate you, of course.
Thank you.
With your beautiful work. It was very interesting to read. It is very interesting to read about China cultural values in relation to a very important topic, of course, marine life. And of course, I also congratulate your supervisory team with this. But my duty today is to pose a question, or several, maybe, if I have the time. But I'll start with one. And the first question that I would like to talk to you about is the issue of gender. In your book, you tell us, especially in chapter 2, that the Chinese attitude towards marine life isn't so different from, for instance, California or other countries. And you also see another similarity, and that is that women are generally a little bit more careful with the environment than men. And you give some kind of short indications as why this might be the case. What would explain that? And one of them is biological urges. Another one is different moral orientations. And the third one is the social cultural context. Yeah. And I would like to invite you to elaborate a little bit more on these. How do you see this notion of biological urges in a Chinese context? How would you explain why women are more favorable, as is shown in chapter 2 and also in chapter 4 with regard to oil and gas drilling? Why would women be more favorable? And can you explain that maybe against the background of this beautiful chapter that you wrote about Chinese traditional values and culture?
Yeah. Highly estimated opponent Thank you for your question. It is a very interesting finding in our research that we find out Chinese women compared to Chinese men are more friendly to marine life protection. And also in our book that we gave some tentative answers already. And first one we gave is about like women tend to be more view this world as a whole, which means that everything is connected with each other, like our humans are also connected with our environment. In that way, that we are mutually dependent on each other, no matter it's humans, no matter it's animals, no matter it's trees, oceans, atmosphere, that we are all living as a whole. On this circumstance, like women tend to believe that, okay, if there's something happen bad to this whole, that then we all gonna receive negative results. But compared to women, men tend to less view it as a whole. They tend to believe that, okay, yeah, humans are unique, that maybe we are the different with other parts in this world, in this planet. So they tend to be more like negative, we say, about viewing the protection of marine life. This is one of the tentative answer. Another of the tentative answer is also men compared to women. That's from the biological factors, that they are more thing-oriented, which they have a specific goal about doing anything. But women tend to be less thing-oriented, and they tend to view everything around it as well. So in that case, men tend to be more goal-oriented. In this way, like, okay, yeah, when we talk about development, we talk about development. When we talk about anything else, we just focus on this thing. We don't think anything related to that. In that case, it might be also the reason that Chinese women are more friendly than Chinese men regarding the environmental protection. But of course, I have to say, like, I'm not an expert in the gender studies as well. This kind of answers and explanations I also have for tentative answers and explanations. And I do believe that nowadays, as our understanding about the gender and gender issues getting increasing, that it is also important for us to dig this area further. Maybe that's also left for future research directions.
Yes,
thank you.
Thank you. In addition to that, why did you particularly choose to do surveys?
Yeah, okay, thank you, highly estimated opponent. The reason we started to do survey is because when we first look into this area, we want to see like how the Chinese people understand how their attitude towards ocean use. We want to gain some existing research results or something, but we find out there are limited research results in the academic area. Under such circumstance, I think the first important thing is to figure out what is the general condition is, what is the big picture is. In that case, that doing survey, although you wouldn't go very deep with your results, but it's possible to offer a more general story and a big picture about the whole situation. That's why we started to focus on the social survey to depict a general picture about Chinese attitudes towards utilizing the oceans. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll leave you off the hook for now a bit.
The opposition will be continued by Professor Dr. Hendrik van Weerden, and Professor van Weerden is Professor of Quantitative Methods of Sustainability Science at the Institute of Ecology at Leuphana University in Lüneburg. And Professor van Weerden is online.
Yes, many thanks, dear candidate. So my question is the following. So you already said a little bit about the context and how your methodological framework allows to get a broader understanding. If you now could make a follow-up study, how would this translate into driving change? If you would have funding for, say, 3 years, but with the agenda to drive change, how would you methodologically approach this?
Okay. Yeah. Dear highly estimated opponents, thank you for your question. Indeed, that's in my PhD research, one of the big limitation, or we see like a constraint for me in conduct this research is about the resource I have. On the one hand, this is just a PhD research. It wouldn't have a lot of like money, time, everything involved, which kind of constrained that the scope we can go to. But also, hypothetically, in the scenario you gave, that I have like another 3 years and I have ample fundings for my research, I would definitely to this research on the basis of current version and to go further. For example, if I could have more funding to conduct the survey, that I may choose not only the online survey, but also like phone survey or paper survey to reach the people, the group that our survey method currently we cannot reach, like the elderly people and people from the rural areas. So in that case, maybe we can help to depict a more general story about the attitudes towards marine life and offshore oil and gas drilling. And on the other hand, that's besides the survey, maybe I will also focus on certain areas and certain topics to dig further into why certain people understand a certain issue or certain usage in different way. For example, in the offshore drilling attitude, that we find out the support to offshore drilling is very low. But also, if I have more time to do that or more funding to do that, I would encourage some interviews or focus group interviews as well to dig further into why the support is very low and why there is a NIMBY mentality within here. And I think that can help us to understand this issue as a multi-layered issue, not only as a single-layered issue. Thank you for...
The opposition will be continued by Professor Dr. Marie-José Enders. And Professor Enders is Professor of Anthrozoology at the Faculty of Psychology and Educational Sciences at the Open University and is also with us online.
Well, I wondered exactly, it was also about the methodological question that I wanted to ask you, but my predecessor already asked some of it. But I wondered, can you explain why you didn't start with interviews with people so that you would collect new data and would use a grounded theory to build on and choose your instruments for that? Because now it's the other way around that you did. Now you say you started with a survey and then maybe later you are going deeper, while I would suppose that you would have started with open interviews and get a lot of rich data and make a grounded theory, and on that theory you would build and choose your instruments. Can you tell a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Okay, thank you, highly estimated opponent. Regarding our research method, we decided to do a survey first and maybe some qualitative research method later. Is based on our own situation at that time. You know, I come from China. China is a big country with people in different areas. They have different living habits. They have different environment. They have different social contexts. In such case, that's different people, different groups, different province, they may understand the same issue in a different way. In that case, that it is indeed a good thing to do a qualitative research first, to do a lot of surveys to understand, okay, yeah, people in this area understand this way, people in that area understand this way, but then we get a lot of single stories. And this kind of single stories cannot help us to depict a whole image about what this situation is understood in the Chinese society, in Chinese context. As we said that in the beginning, we do not have that many studies or ready-made research results, that it is going to be hard for us to develop our own theory without understanding the general population. You may also wondering, okay, which story represents the whole story, right? So in that case, it would make sense to depict the general story first. Especially using a survey is helpful to understand, okay, although people living in different provinces, people living in different cities, they have their own views, they have their own living style, but something is in common there. And this commonality is what we're targeted as. And maybe later, we can do something different to look into different group of people, different province of people, and different social groups of people to understand what's their story and what's their understanding. So I think, yeah, in that way, that's the reason why we started to do in this way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. But can I ask you a little question more? How did you manage to use grounded theory in a quantitative study?
Yeah, well, for me, the grounded theory are based on our survey result and also some previous existing studies. Like the survey result we have from the previous offshore drilling attitude and marine life attitude, and also some existing theories, like one of my colleagues, Bin Tao, that her studies about some Chinese animal attitude, and also some existing animal attitude studies as well. So we based on our survey data, based on the correlations we discovered, based on like the different attitudes towards a different type of marine life using, different type of animal using. Based on that, we discover like, okay, yeah, so how do different people related this attitude to? And then we building our data from there. So this is how we did in our research. Thank you.
Thank you.
The opposition will be continued by Dr. Jessica Mesman. And Dr. Mesman is Associate Professor of Science and Technology Studies at the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences of Maastricht University.
Dear candidate, dear Mo, first I would like to congratulate you with your dissertation, and it's really a very important and relevant topic considering the ecological crisis we live in. And yeah, in your case, you focus on the Chinese coastal communities, and you refer more specifically to the fact that you would like to contribute to a policy that tries at least to make humans live in a more sustainable way with the oceans. And in this way, your research, of course, stands out as very societal relevancy, and I also would like to congratulate your supervisors with this. In a way, we can say, mission accomplished, you did it.
Thank you.
And you also come with further implications, and that's actually what I want to discuss with you. So you talk about the next step, the effective governmental policy. After all, we have your analysis of human attitudes towards marine life, industry exploitation, and you indeed argue sustainability doesn't equalize no exploitation. You say no, there's a balance. And based on your results, you describe in chapter 6 further measures, strategies. And what I'm interested in is in your view on policy management and the role of the communities and what they can play in the very specific context of the policy management in China, which you describe, and now I quote you, "For the past few decades, environmental governance in mainland China has been relatively closed and top-down. This ensures strong governmental management, but largely prevents environmental NGOs and residential communities from participation in and contributing to environmental conservation." Now, what I would like to ask you is that you share your views on the way you envision the implementation of your findings in this very particular kind of governmental context, with having this closed and top-down political context in mind. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah. You're highly estimated, Dr. Jessica. Thank you for your question. Indeed, that discussion was based on our survey result when we talk about the public attitudes towards environmental concern and also marine life in this chapter. And we discovered that on the basis of, we find out like although the majority of the Chinese people hold positive attitudes towards environmental protection, marine life protection, but their participation in relative environmental NGOs and the environmental activities stays at a relatively low level. In that case, that we conclude that, okay, yeah, maybe that sometimes because of the work has been done by either the governmental agency or the different institute, so the public may have the feeling like, okay, yeah, it's their business, it's not my business. Under such circumstance that I would say, let's make it into our business as well. In that case, we need to encourage people to participate into this protection and participate into sustainable human use of the oceans. And especially from our daily life, especially as we see like how we live in this society, I would say that it's sometimes not that difficult. For example, for human beings, for each of us, like maybe like decreasing your dietary habits, decreasing your traveling, flying times can already be a good start for reaching sustainable human use. Because yeah, everything is correlated. And for example, if we care about the carbon emission, that will result in the oceans and ocean acidification issue as well. So in that case, I would encourage people to take more participate into this environmental protection and marine life protection. Also, I would say if they already have a positive attitudes towards ocean using and marine life protection, then we already have a solid social base for promoting such marine activities. Therefore, it shouldn't be very difficult for this kind of thing to promote in the Chinese society. Yeah, thank you.
Just for matters of clarification, so I do realize what you say in a way is that it's on an individual level.
Yeah.
And in what way do you see the position of communities in relation to policy, participation in policy making? Can you say, because in a way you say there's hardly any space for that, because this is also about attitudes, not only about attitudes toward marine life or industrial drilling, but it's also attitudes towards policy, not only from communities, but also from policy makers actually towards communities.
Yeah. I think because we did not find any existing literature or earlier studies, that also indicated a situation which means that, okay, yeah, maybe current policy making doesn't really include this voice from the public. And that's also indicate that, okay, yeah, maybe their understanding or their opinions haven't been treated properly. In that case, I would say like for the community level, maybe they can also at least show their voice and at least make their opinion to be available for the policymakers to understand what they really think and what they really want. That's already a good start to start this process. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The opposition will be continued by Dr. Thomas Kraft, and Dr. Kraft is Associate Professor of International and Comparative Health at the Faculty of Health, Medicine, Life Sciences of Maastricht University, and present with us online.
Dear Mo, congratulations to a very nice and well-written and well-presented thesis. I would like to follow up a little bit on what has been discussed before. Your research is on coastal management and coastal sea research. you presented that you got the idea from a severe oil spill that initiated some critical debate in China on environmental protection of coastal areas and the sea. Beginning of March, the Intergovernmental Conference on Marine Biodiversity in Areas Beyond National Jurisdiction, or the so-called High Seas Treaty, agreed on new measures to control the conservation of marine life and also the control of access to high seas. China has played a critical role in this treaty and has supported it strongly. But I'm wondering how this will be accepted. Also reading your study, oil spill and oil drilling in coastal areas is one thing, but getting access to seafood and fisheries is another issue. And the Chinese government has restricted fishing. That's also what you mentioned in your thesis. Specifically during summertime, there are clear restrictions. But at the same time, China is investing in high sea fishery and is expanding further and further. So my question is, from your research, what do you think will be the acceptance if the Chinese government has to become more restrictive following these new high sea treaty and controlling biodiversity or supporting and protecting biodiversity of the high seas?
Okay, yeah. Dear heads meeted, Dr. Thomas Kraft, thank you for your question. Yeah, indeed, that China has playing a big role in the international fishery market and also international marine issues. That's also because of China is the biggest fishery products importer and exporter. As far as I can remember, it's still the biggest importer and exporter based on the last year figures at this moment. That's why that's made their opinions become very important. I think, as I mentioned in the thesis, that during the past years, that the Chinese government and a lot of us has already realized the important issue of the fishery resource depletion and marine pollution, and also like oil spill environmental disasters. So they are also taking initiatives, they are also taking measures to deal with this situation. As I mentioned in the book, that's the summer moratoriums to leave fish some time to grow, and also building different marine protection zones, and also conducting different social activities, join different international organizations. Of course, I think that shows an attitude from the higher level hierarchy, that they know that this is an important issue that we should address, and at least that they are also willing to do something to protect the ocean, to reach the sustainable human use of the oceans. Where indeed, based on the current societal needs and human needs, that it can be concluded that China will remain the top fishery products or something as the top position for a couple of years maybe, but it still means that, okay, yeah, China will not cease its initiatives and also its activities in these protection activities as well. Because at the same time, that's kind of also what we mentioned in our thesis, to balance the needs between to balance the situation between human needs and the marine life production. As we said, like setting boundaries is one thing. Another thing is looking for substitutes. Like we see, like, okay, yeah, the Chinese people, that they find it relatively tolerable to use marine life, especially fish, crabs, like as food. And then why don't we do specific marine farming? And just to limit this kind of marine farming in a certain area and to a certain group of people. And then in that case, that we can meet the international needs and also the domestic needs, but also at the same time, we're providing with major fishing or deep ocean fishing as well. So I think this could be a good strategy for dealing with this situation. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The opposition will be continued by Professor Dr. Anja Krumek.
Dear candidate, I'm happy to have another opportunity to exchange thoughts with you about your book. I would like one of your paranymphs to read Proposition 2 and Proposition 7, if that could be done, please.
To understand the origins of the present unsustainable use of the Earth's oceans and to develop effective governmental policy, understanding present human attitudes towards and perceptions of the oceans is critical. This is number 2. One needs to understand the continuity of Chinese culture and history to fully grasp the use of marine life in present Chinese society. This is number 7.
Thank you very much. What I take from these, what I understand from these two propositions is there's a very strong assumption in your book that it is very important to understand the general public's attitudes because that will tell you something about their inclination to change something or to change their practices. And that it is important also to understand the historical and cultural background of attitudes. And this reminds me very much of a debate that goes on for a long time already in anthropology, and that is, can you use your knowledge about people's thoughts, about people's culture, can you use that in a way, can you use it or should you use that in a way to culturally, appropriately change their behavior and change culture? And I was wondering, is this something that you had in mind when you were thinking of effective governmental policy? Is governmental policy involving focus on humans' attitudes, Chinese attitudes and behavior with regard to marine life? Or is it more individual education that you would think is effective governmental policy? The problem with these two is, of course, that they're very much focusing on people in communities and put, let's say, the burden and the responsibility on their shoulders. Or do you have something completely different in mind when you talk about effective governmental policy? Leaving aside the question whether you will be able to influence Chinese policy, as my colleague already talked about, or do you have a completely different idea about regulating oil drilling and gas drilling, regulating production, etc.? So, does this focus on attitude mean that you see the low-hanging fruits, maybe most in individual people in China changing behavior and culture?
Okay, dear highly estimated opponent, thank you for your question. First of all, like we talk about this in the proposition and also in our dissertation, is because we want to explain why the Chinese people, especially in the coastal Chinese societies, understand the use of certain marine resources in this way. And we like to find the cultural and historical origins of such public attitudes. Mm-hmm. That's therefore we look into the traditional Chinese culture and the Asian Chinese society to looking for the answers. For example, like we discovered, like the Chinese tend to find it acceptable when we use marine life for scientific research. And we believe this is correlated with the Confucianism traditional Chinese culture. Because in Confucianism Chinese culture, in the traditional Chinese culture, like scientific research or education is highly valued in this philosophy. In that case, anything you do for doing science, for doing education, is considered as the highest, is considered as the priority among priorities. That's why we bring Confucianism in explaining such attitudes. And also, in this case, that we won't say, once we already understood that Confucianism has played an important role here in shaping the public attitudes towards marine life, that we can already, first of all, understand why they take such public attitude. And secondly, we can make some dealing strategies for the present issue we're looking at the moment, especially the sustainable challenges we're confronting with nowadays. Not exactly mean that we need to change something, but it do mean that what we can do to take the remediation and also to change, not to change, but to bring a different atmosphere or bring a different environment for us and for people. And I think it is important to use the cultural origins, to understand the cultural origins and social origins, not only to explain these public attitudes, but also looking for solutions. As we say, like, we already know that Confucianism is a major cornerstone in traditional Chinese culture. And then we can use some ideas, some thoughts from the Confucianism to promote the sustainable use of marine life. For example, the summer moratorium is already a good indication of the Confucianism philosophy, which is very important in Chinese culture, is 中庸, means in the middle of everything, not to go too extreme into the both sides. Therefore, like, we have the summer moratorium to spend 3 months without any fishing activities, to give the time for the fish or for the shrimps, for the crabs to grow. And in the other case, when the time is over, we can start to go to fish again. Through this way, we can properly dealing with finding the balance between human needs and marine life protection. Therefore, that doesn't mean that we have a fundamentally different idea about what should be done or something. It's just like we want to bring Confucianism, we want to bring the cultural factors into discussion and into understanding this situation. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
The opposition will be continued by Professor Dr. Henrik van Leerden, who is with us online.
Yes, many things. Dear opponent, so dear candidate, sorry, I have to still learn my Dutch defense skills. So you wrote in your text that Buddhists aren't centered on anthropocentrism. I would partly agree with this notion, but some Buddhist philosophers have claimed that we have a high responsibility being reborn as humans. So because we can feel compassion for other beings. Would you make a link that this brings a special responsibility for human beings, considering the marine life and like the oceans?
Sorry, I didn't hear clearly. That you're asking that humans have the responsibilities to protect the marine life? Sorry?
We have a higher responsibility from a Buddhism stance because we are being reborn as beings that feel compassion with other beings. Some Buddhist philosophers have claimed that, and that maybe would put us at a higher stance. Some could argue, maybe in our wrong understanding, but I don't know, maybe you can tell me, because we are different from other beings because we can feel compassion.
Yeah, okay, dear highly estimated opponent, thank you for your question. That indeed, we as humans are different with other non-human animals in this world. On the one hand, that we have the emotions, and on the other hand, we have the human intelligence. That's facilitate our way of living in this planet, but also make ourselves at risk to this planetary as well. As I already said, that in some culture or thought that people tend to view the whole planet, view the whole Earth as a whole. And following that philosophy, that this is indeed is humans' responsibility as we're high-level we're high-level animals, and then we have the responsibility to take care of this planet and also to take care of this environment. But also that doesn't limit what we can do, because we have the human intelligence and this should be done in a proper way. So we should be active, and also we should find the ways to protect our neighbors, friends in this planet. And in that case, that's, as we said, that we have to do more about animal welfare, we have to do more about environmental protection, we have to address the pressing sustainability challenges we're dealing with nowadays, especially like climate change and carbon dioxide emission, which are very important to the ocean protection. I mean, in that way that we can build a sustainable atmosphere around us as well. So, yeah. Thank you.
The opposition will be continued by Professor Dr. Marie-José Enders, who is with us online also.
I would like to ask you in what way your thesis can be useful to change the attitudes of the Chinese people, the findings that you have. In what way you would think that it would be they would be useful to make changes in the Chinese marine life?
Dear highly admitted opponent, thank you for your question. Indeed, that if our thesis, our results can change the public attitude, it would be good. But I think one major task of our research first is to depict the general situation at first. And if you ask me that which part I would want to change, and I would like to contribute to the changes, I would say it's the part of the offshore oil and gas drilling attitude. Because from our research and because from our survey results, we discover that the public are sometimes overestimated and sometimes even exaggerate a bit about the risks associated with like offshore oil and gas drilling. Like for example, they believe the large-scale environmental disasters happens very often. But actually, that 2011 Bohai Bay oil spill is the first large-scale oil spill because of drilling operation happened in the coastal China, start from the opening and reform. So in that case, because once it happened, it has huge disastrous effects, which give people these disastrous feelings that they wanted to never happen again. But in fact, that's the only one. And also nowadays, 12 years has passed. We haven't had that large-scale oil spill event anymore. And also, people tend to exaggerate a bit about the health risks to the local people. Indeed, that oil spills, the spilled oil can cause a lot of problems for the local residents as well. But we shouldn't exaggerate such risks, and we should start to live in a reasonable way and establishing rational understanding of different human activities in the ocean. So that's what I want to change. But as I said, that's something suitable for further research and maybe later what we can do. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I wonder if you would use the knowledge about the women and how they feel about marine life and the protection of it, if you would have any idea how to use that in changing attitudes.
I wouldn't say like I would take advantage or take use of this attitude. I discover this kind of difference just to find out like, okay, which group in China may have a better attitudes towards marine life protection or towards offshore oil and gas drilling. Indeed, this is the survey result shows us. At least I think for the policymakers, they may have a better understanding about what they can do based on our research results. And that is not part of the scope of our research. So I wouldn't go very further into that, but I believe as scientific researchers, our job is to deliver with the most objective research results to the policymakers, to the society, and for them to decide what they can do. But what we need to do is to give them the story, the information. Thank you.
The opposition will be continued by Dr. Jessica Messman.
Dear candidates, I would like to ask you something about not in my backyard, the NIMBY issue. And in chapter 4, you indicated actually many social scientists consider the concept NIMBY as too limited. You say that to encompass the motives of local opposition and adequately represent a multidimensional human perception. They propose other concepts like place attachment, place protective action. And according to these social scientists, these concepts do a much better job to conceptualize public opinion. Despite that kind of quite fundamental critique, you say, no, well, anyway, I stick with NIMBY. And you say, you know why? It sufficiently describes what I want to do. And then I think, what is sufficiently in your case? And can you explain a bit more elaborate why you have chosen to stick with NIMBY, which is highly debated within the social science community? And can you elaborate more on your kind of explanation?
Okay, yeah. Dear highly estimated Dr. Jessica, yes, we introduced the concept of NIMBY, not in my backyard, is because we want to depict how the public support to the offshore oil and gas drilling. At first, we discovered that the support to offshore oil and gas drilling remains at a very low level. But that doesn't mean that people opposed to them in the same level as well. And then we use the concept of NIMBY to see, are they also opposed them in a different level or in the same level as well? And then we use the concept of NIMBY because this can most directly to show if they oppose to the offshore drilling at the same level. Of course, that NIMBY concept has been criticized by other social scholars. Like some people say, like it's just a place attachment. It's just like a mental feeling to where you're living. But indeed, that because in our research, the design is to test the support to offshore oil and gas drilling and to see if they support and if they oppose to offshore oil and gas drilling in the same way. Then we stick to the concept of NIMBY. And very interestingly, we found out the public attitudes in this area is different. That people opposed to offshore and gas drilling is in a different way. If it's in my backyard somewhere close to me, that people say like, no, I don't want that. But if it's somewhere far away, I would say it's none of my business. So maybe that's what we find. That's also what we find we really want to research. Yeah. Thank you.
So what you found fits so much the NIMBY issue that you say we stick with that. But then it's an outcome and not.
It's not an outcome. It's more like how to use the proper term or concept to describe your research findings.
Okay, thank you so much.
The opposition will be continued by Dr. Thomas Kraft, who is also with us online.
A very brief question at the end. You have done research on a global issue with a strong regional focus. You are Chinese. You have done research in China on China. And you have done this in a Dutch university with a scholarship from CSC. I'm wondering what your experience is. What is the added value of doing this research at a Dutch university based on a CSC scholarship? And what can both sides learn? Is it beneficial for both sides that you have done your research here?
Dear highly estimated opponent, thank you for your question. Indeed, as a Chinese student, that doing a Chinese study in a Dutch university is a unique experience for me. First of all, I would like to go to a Dutch university to do this research because I want to experience a different academic atmosphere and different academic environment to do research. For example, like I was trained in a traditional way of like lectures, teaching, and we taking notes and doing exams. And in Maastricht University, this is my first time to discover the problem-based learning, which is all new to me, and also which is a unique experience for me, which I think I have learned a lot from this experience. And besides that, if I'm doing this research in China, I would be surrounded by people similar to me. We have the similar background, similar experience, and maybe we understand things in the similar way. But here in a Dutch university, in different social cultural settings, that I get to contact with people from all over the world and also ask about how they understand things and how they understand certain situations. So that's why I think it's the most added value.
Mo Chen, the time appointed for defending your thesis has passed. So the degree committee will now withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and of your defense. And I request that you and your company await the results of our deliberations in this and our return in this room.
Thank you.
Please all rise.
The PhD defense has now ended. The degree committee will debate the candidate's performance behind closed doors. This process usually takes about 10 minutes.
Long road to the south side. 7 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and that. I know you know that I can't read your mind. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. Cause I'll go the extra mile. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and that. On the dash, got my laces tied. Long road, I don't waste no time. Break rules because fate decides. With the team and we chase the light. I make a move, fall down, shake it off. I hate to lose, bad branch, break it off. No room for negativity, praise and love. Prepare for deep part cause we're taking off. Take the mileage, traveling so far from home. Gathering knowledge, other connections. I put the time in to get everything I ever hoped for. It's a challenge and we all in. Better future that we go for. And even though these nights seem long, I know that I am never on my own. Know you won the battle once you've grown. South side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and that. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer. mirror, east side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile or die. What's on the line? I know you know that I can't read your mind. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. 'Cause I'll go the extra mile.
Mo Chen. The degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and of your defense. And in view of its positive verdict, and taking into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. And Professor Martens is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom. I invite your supervisor to now take the floor.
Please all rise.
Do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times, to be careful and honest, transparent, independent, and responsible?
Yes, I promise.
Then, by the authority vested in us by law, and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present, I hereby confer upon you, Mo Chen, the degree of doctor and grant you all rights attached by custom and law. As evidence of this, I now present you with the degree certificate signed by the rector, the secretary, and the other members of the committee, and affixed with the official seal of the university.
Thank you.
Please be seated.
Dear Mo, dear Dr. Chen, it was a pleasure for me to congratulate you first. And you know, when I do a presentation or day show, I always check my files. So also with you. And according to my files, the first time you contacted me was early 2018. You emailed me with a very nice email saying that you were looking for a supervisor. At that time, you had worked at Radboud University in Nijmegen, but wanted to change your host university to do your PhD research on a scholarship of the Chinese Science Council. I remember we had some email exchanges about the choice of your topic and the time needed to complete it. And although you had already a flying start in Nijmegen, your estimate to finish your PhD in 2 more years I consider to be a little too optimistic. Your response, and I quote, "If 2 years' time is a little tight, I believe 3 years would be more reasonable to finish a PhD project." You can imagine that I still was not convinced. In the emails and meetings that followed, I still tried to convince you that 3 years would likely not be enough to finish your PhD, and you tried to convince me that it would be feasible. Your persistence and personality finally led me to agree to start this adventure together, and I must say, in the years we worked together, I never regretted it. Unlike many other students to come from a country far away, you were already adapted to the Dutch culture. You managed to combine the Chinese politeness with the Dutch big mouth, in that you always told me what you thought of it, but in a very polite way. You presented your work at several meetings, and your PhD research got also the attention of many other academics, like the well-known Harold Herzog. This professor of Western Carolina University in the United States developed the animal attitude scale, and he was very pleased to see that you adapted this to examine attitudes towards marine life. But maybe even more important than your academic achievements, I got to know you as someone who is very smart, open-minded, stubborn if needed, and a very nice person. You really integrated at Maastricht University, and you were always willing to help the new Chinese scholarship students with your experience. You were also very sportive, and when you invited me for a game of squash, I built up the tension. I thought I would see every corner of the court. Well, Mo, keep on practicing. Maybe next time. As a very social person, the corona crisis also hit you hard. You visited Leuphana University in Lüneburg to work there some time within the Erasmus exchange program. But 2 weeks after you arrived, the university closes down due to the corona pandemic. So you had to return to the Netherlands. Also back in Maastricht, it was not an easy time. I remember that we had a Zoom meeting and that you were sitting in your small apartment looking a little sad. I tried to cheer you up, and after a few virtual beers together, you felt better. I really appreciated how you and all the other students, PhD students as well, at that time managed to get through the corona crisis. As the PhD took a little longer than the 2 years you tried to convince me several times, you also started to work as a lecturer for the Global Health Program. I am still impressed how you combined that with finishing your PhD. I'm also proud to mention that you already got another grant from Maastricht University. For those of you who do not know, Mo was awarded a Sustainable Seed Grant, in which he will work on online education regarding sustainable development within Maastricht University students. Dear Mo, I already said that you achieved a lot the last several years. I think that I also speak on behalf of your second supervisor, Mark Davidson, when I say that we also learned a lot from you. It's not always easy to work far away from your family and friends, but you always kept your spirits high. Your working ethics and nice character is something we can all learn from. Early this month, nearly 200 countries agreed to protect marine life in the oceans. And I think it's no coincidence that this historic treaty has been signed in the same month as you defended your PhD thesis on how to use our oceans in a sustainable way. I'm sure your work will take the research on how humans relate to oceans another step further, not only in the Netherlands, not only in China, but in the world at large. Dr. Chen, again, my sincere congratulations to you, your friends, and your parents and family, which must be very proud. I will close in my best Chinese by saying, Chu He Chen Mo Boshi. Congratulations.
Well, dear Dr. Chen, of course, also on behalf of Maastricht University, I congratulate you with the degree achieved. But before we can go and celebrate, I would like to invite the audience to already go to the Refter for the reception, but we have to stay a little bit for some official pictures together with the assessment committee online, and then we'll move to the hall to make another official picture. I close this academic ceremony.
Thank you.